Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's event, the Center for Digital Education Academy, what school officials need to know about social media in education. This is Morgan Wright. I'm a senior fellow here at the Center for Digital Education. I'm also going to be your moderator for today's event, and just want to say thank you for joining us. This is going to be an informative session for the next 90 minutes, and that's why it's called an academy. We've got some really good stuff here. Now, before we begin, just a couple of brief housekeeping notes. We will make a recording of this presentation available to everybody who registered within 48 hours. Now, use it for your reference, pass it along to your colleagues, especially those who could not attend today. Now, this webcast is interactive, and you can participate in the Q&A by asking questions at any time during the presentation. You'll see a Q&A box down at the bottom of your console. Just click that question, make it interactive, send us the questions, and we'll make sure we get to as many as we can at the end of our presentation. Now, our speakers will address as many of these questions as we can during the Q&A. And if you'd like to download a PDF of this today, just click down on the Webinar Resources widget at the bottom of your console. You can also connect with folks over LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. Just use hashtag CDE Live to connect with everybody and let us know you're out there. Now, at the end of today's event, you're going to see a survey pop up, folks, and we really encourage you to do this survey. This Center for Digital Education Academy is a direct result of the response we got from everybody saying we'd like to go on certain subjects, we want to go more in depth, learn more, we'd like to go for a longer time. So this was in response to that. So make sure you do that at the end. And if you have to leave early, we understand, just make sure you click on the survey widget and finish that before you go. Otherwise, it will pop up once you're done. So now at this time, before we get started, make sure you disable your pop-up blockers. And if you've got any issues at all, technical issues, just put them there in the chat box as well. And our crack staff from On24 will get on and help you folks. So let's get to the fun part. Joining me today for this very timely topic is Lisa Luten. She's the Communications Director for Wake County Public School System. Angela Dice, she is the Web and Social Media Content Developer for Central Kitsap School District. And Anil Chawla, he is the Founder and Chief Executive Officer for ArchiveSocial. But before we get done, before we start that, I'm going to do just a quick introduction. It's called Social Media by the Numbers. I'm going to kind of give an overview of it. Then we're going to go into the presentations, and then we're going to talk about what school officials need to know about social media in education. Anil's going to talk about the legal aspects of social media. Then we get to our live Q&A. Now, you folks are going to see just a little issue here across the top. Don't worry about it. If it's a little grayed out to you, that's okay. It's just a minor glitch. The other slides are going to look good, so don't worry about that. But let's start off with this real quick. So let's talk about social media by the numbers, because there's actually three key issues we want to talk about today when we deal with social media by the numbers. So what's the first issue? Well, the first issue is probably one of the most contentious issues anytime you're involved in any kind of a government-funded entity, and that is the issues of the First Amendment, free speech. What can we do about it? What are the issues around it? More people have gotten into trouble deleting things and doing things around free speech because they didn't have policies. We'll talk about that. So this has been one of the key areas for lawsuits, for transparency issues. So it's the issue of free speech. So we're going to make sure that we dive into that and discuss that as well. So the second part coming up is, folks, look, because we're talking about education, this isn't just your traditional classroom where we had desks, and a teacher up there. We are now extremely interactive now. We have devices, we have software, we have technology. It's changing the way children learn. It's changing the way teachers teach, and it's changing the way we view the system as a whole, especially as parents. Now, the problem is you still have these things. We still have to worry about what are the rules. I promise I won't do it again. Back in my day, you'd have to go right on the chalkboard now. Right, so what do you do now with the aspect of social media? There's so many things, so many implications there. So we want to make sure that we also avoid those pitfalls. And the third thing, this is something I'm a firm believer in terms of anytime you deploy something, anytime you introduce something new, I think there's three things you have to worry about. The first one is policy. And I understand sometimes we have to kill a lot of trees. We shouldn't, because we should make the policies easy. But we have to address the policies. It's like driving a car. Before you drive a car, what's the first thing you sit down and do? You sit down and you look at the rules. We follow the rules of the road. So from social media, especially in education, what are the rules of the road? What are the policy? Then the second thing we do is we do training. We train people on this. We teach them the behaviors we want. We're already in an educational setting. Well, let's take this educational setting, especially with teachers, administrators, and students, and let's make sure that everybody understands what they are, that we practice it, that we train for these rules so that we can follow them. And then the third thing, I like using this one because I've got some friends in the military, new actually an F-117 stealth fighter, and you would not believe the amount of paperwork, the schoolwork, the classroom time they had to put in before they even got to get into a simulator where they trained. Then and only then do you get to fly the fun stuff, the fast stuff, which is this F-117. But, folks, whatever you do, Please don't do this. This is Lindsay Lohan saying, hello, Facebook. Yes, this is actually Lindsay. Welcome to my Facebook page, as she puts it out on Twitter. So with that being said today, let's talk about our first speaker. Now, our first speaker is Angela Dice, and she is the web and social media content developer for Central Kitsap School District. And pardon me here for just 1 second here. And as I pull this up, let's go to our first poll question, too, because what we want to do is I'll get her bio, we'll start reading that, and we'll get to your first poll question. So as we do this, let's talk about your first poll question, which is, how is your school district engaging in social media? So choose all that apply. To keep parents informed of school activities, in the classroom to support the curriculum, to boost student engagement, or we do not use social media at all. So is it to keep parents informed of school activities, in the classroom to support the curriculum, to boost student engagement, or we do not use social media at all? So let's talk about this. So Angela is the developer. She believes in the power of education and communications to strengthen her communities. She is a school communications pro focused on website and social media. She's worked in healthcare and state corrections communications, but she still has a warm spot for her 12 years as a newspaper reporter and editor. Wow. So you can see that this is right up her alley here. So let's see what those results are. So 91% say it's to keep parents informed of school activities. I mean, that's very good. So you can see there's a lot of engagement. 25% of you use it in the classroom to support the curriculum. 33% use it to boost student engagement, but only 8% of you don't use social media. So Angela, that sounds like some pretty good things there. So let me turn it over to you. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And it's really heartening to see that a lot of you are using social media. I just want to start off by giving you a little bit of context about our school district. We have about 11,000 students in 19 schools, and we are across the Puget Sound from Seattle near Naval Base Kitsap at Bremerton and Bangor, so we have a pretty tech-savvy community. But our district was pretty late to the social media game. Parents had been asking us for years to engage them on social media, and even back in 2012, we'd done a communications audit, and parents were asking us to get on social media, but we didn't get on until just about a year and a half ago. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what changed. Over the past few years, as I guess we've all seen, the media landscape has evolved pretty quickly. We can no longer rely on, and we don't actually always need our shrinking local news media to tell our stories. But even though local news media is shrinking, people are getting more information than ever. I put this slide up here to kind of point out some information that people get about 9 hours of exposure to media daily. That's from advertisements, that's from tweets and posts they see on social media, and it comes out to about 5,000 messages a day. But only a small percentage of those messages attract even a few seconds of attention. So all our important school information, those great stories we have about innovation in our classrooms, are kind of like droplets in a waterfall, or more like a crumpled up piece of paper in an overflowing backpack. So when our schools told me that they were concerned that parents were ignoring their newsletters and announcements, that they'd forget basic information like when holidays were or when our early releases were, it was not a big surprise. And our problem was compounded by the fact that we had websites that were built, house-built in the 1990s. But some of our schools were getting really creative about sharing out their information. One of them had kids make paper bandanas and write reminders when they had non-student days, so they'd all come home with little bandanas saying, no school tomorrow. But thankfully that's not going to be our only solution, right? We have a communications director and a superintendent who realized that we needed to improve the way we engaged with our parents and communities online. So they hired me in December of 2014 to improve our digital communications, and I was tasked not only with getting our district ready to say yes to social media, but also to manage the redesign of our district and school websites and to communicate our capital projects needs. But most importantly, our leaders realized that we needed to reach parents where they are. So according to Pew, about 90% of Internet users ages 18 to 29 and about 78% of users ages 30 to 49 use social networks. So it's not a question of whether people are on social media. They are. There's, if you see the slide up there, more than 1 billion people are actively using Facebook. And if you think they're there and they're not talking about your schools, then you're not really listening. So it's sort of like not answering the phone at this point. Before I was in communications, I worked for the local paper. I ran its website and built its social media presence. And I used to see people commenting all the time. Every time we had a school story, every time we had really any kind of story, they'd be responding on Facebook with all kinds of bad information. And as a journalist, I try to correct when I could, but there are limits to what I could fact check, mostly because I just didn't know enough about an organization or enough about an issue to tell them what was true or not. And the people who did know the most, the schools or the businesses, were pretty silent. And so you kind of let those people guide that conversation, and you don't give them another place to have it. So really when it comes to social, you can let people talk about you, or you can join the conversation and let them talk with you. And that's really what drove our district into getting a social media presence. And plus, social media just feels like a more intimate way to communicate with people. You can ask questions and you can answer them directly, and it really helps to make people feel more connected. And when people feel connected to you, you can break through all that media message clutter and get those important school messages home. But starting an account wasn't just enough. When we decided to move into social media, we set ourselves some goals. And those were kind of, pie in the sky goals. We wanted to be able to share our successes and share school information. We wanted to be able to share critical information like school closures. And we wanted to build trust with our community, which was particularly important because we were about to head into a bond request. And we wanted to strengthen our partnerships with our, businesses and community members and parents and get them engaged with our schools. And we really wanted to build up a culture of two-way communications. And social media is a great tool for that. It's for listening just as it is much for broadcasting. But I'm sure, as you all know and you've all heard, that it's just not all rainbows and sunshine. There are real risks when it comes to social media. What do you do? We had to ask ourselves, what do you do when something is taken out of context or just shouldn't be said? Because, on social media, it can go viral pretty quickly. And we also needed to make sure that we respected our students' privacy. How do we make sure to keep our students safe and respect our parents' privacy concerns? We had to be mindful of public records requests. In our state, in Washington State, even metadata is considered part of the public record. So how could we keep track of that? And we had to ask ourselves, both at a district and a school level, do we really have the time to do this and do this right? And one of the things we hear a lot is people aren't nice on the internet sometimes. So we kind of had to look at our policies and our guidelines to kind of address those things. But when we were looking at all these risks, one of the things that we really had to keep in mind is none of these were stopping points. We had to ask ourselves, what are the greater risks? And there's a very real risk that other people are going to fill the information void for you, that they're going to spread bad information, particularly in a crisis. And we had to remember the rewards. And those rewards are having more engaged families and communities. And, that links directly with the support for our schools and our student success. So when we moved forward, we looked at ways to mitigate those risks. So like I said before, we looked at our policies, but we didn't just look at creating one new social media policy. We looked at a wide range of policies. We wanted to set expectations that the way our staff act on social media is just as important as how we act on email or in face-to-face interactions. And we made sure that social media was reflected in a range of policies. We wanted to make sure that our teachers and our schools had the power to use these tools. We didn't want to limit them either. We didn't want to mire them in procedures for things. So we focused on framing our policies and our guidelines as kind of just common sense and good digital citizenship. Some of the key features of our social media policy that we did create is that we required staff, even those with existing accounts, to get principal or administrator's approval and fill out a Google form to register it, just so we can keep track. And we also decided to create sort of a easy-to-read guidelines for staff and administrators to let them understand all of the expectations that we had of them. And like I said, we also looked at student privacy, and part of that is just communicating privacy guidelines that are already out there, like FERPA and COPA. And we we have kind of an opt-out requirement with parents. We every year give them our Form 8, and we let them know that if you don't want your child to appear on social media, on websites, you can opt out of this. Part of that was this is just kind of the easiest way for us to track those parents' desires, in addition to that, we also recommend that schools and teachers regularly tell parents that their kids may appear on social media. So at the beginning of the year, when you send that letter home, say, hey, we have this social media page. If you don't want to be on here, this is the process to get out of it. And we tell staff to respect parents' wishes. If a parent wants you to take a picture down, just do it. But this is something that student privacy is something we are continually having conversations with because social media evolves so quickly. We also looked at our public records disclosure laws, and you're going to hear all about that a little bit later. And we also took a look at our resources. Like I said, we hired me in part to do social media. So that was this resource question is really a school-level question. We recommend that each school choose one social media account, but they can open multiple if they want to, and share the love, essentially, to give multiple people access to post things and to really set that kind of expectation and that what your goals are. We suggest they create content calendars so that they're regularly planning to have things on their social media accounts. And then we talked about the big thing, which was comments. And our district treats comments on social media much like comments made at a school board meeting. We rarely remove them. There's not a lot of clear legal precedent on removing them, so even negative comments we just kind of leave up there. And it's not just a legal reason that we do that. It's also because it helps us appear and be transparent. We can respond publicly and correct public misperceptions and show people that we care about what they have to say. And we know that it can be contentious. So far in the past year that we've had social media, we actually haven't had, our individual schools have not had any problems. We have had some negative commenting at the district level, but at the school level that really hasn't been a problem. And really when I counsel administrators and staff, they're concerned about that one parent who's always been a kind of a bane. And I really try to ask them, are you really going to let one or two people dictate your potential to reach your entire classroom or your entire school? And usually the answer is no. And like I said, most of the time it's been a really positive situation. So we launched our district social media presence in May 2015. That's when our school board approved our new social media policy, and we changes to other policies like our digital resources policy. And we went through and talked with school leaders, and we went to individual schools and at their request and talked about how to build Facebook pages and how to answer certain questions and take risks. And we have since then opened up about a dozen different school Facebook accounts. A couple of them are also on Twitter. One of our first schools to use social media was our secondary school. It's a 6 to 12 secondary school, so it has about 1,000 students. And it tends to be one of our more rurally set schools, and they have a very tight-knit community. Their Facebook page has really amplified this kind of family-style school culture that they have. And now their Facebook page has about 800 followers, and that's a mix of staff and students. But one of our biggest successes was actually one of our most recent additions. It was a middle school, and they have a new principal. He used to be a popular teacher in our district, and he left for a couple of years to become a principal elsewhere, and then came back this year to lead his former school. And what we found in the past year is anytime we make posts about popular school staff, it always does well. But this principal, his first post, the very first post on their brand new Facebook page reached 23,000 people and got 10,000 views. And it was just a video of him using a selfie stick in his gym, just telling people how excited he was to be back at the Ridge and how much he loved his school. And I don't know if you can see that, but 340 more than 340 people liked it or loved that post, and they were so excited to have him back. And their Facebook page got an instant following. And that's important to them because they're able then to share a bunch of important information, when to get certain forms home. They are getting to celebrate students. They are sharing helpful information. At the beginning of the year, I don't know if any of you are in the middle schools or have been in a middle school on the first day of school, but one of the most difficult skills that kids have to learn is opening a lock on their locker. So they posted a short little video of how to use a combination lock, and it reached 80,000 people. People shared it like crazy because some just thought it was funny, but a lot of them thought it was really useful information. And so all this has also kind of helped translate to some success at the district level as well. We have been able to share information about our schools, and that information moves pretty quickly. Whenever we have things like a school closure or we have a high-profile lockdown, we're able to post that information in addition to our traditional calls and posts on our websites. And it reaches a ton of people. Like I said in the beginning, our school district has 11,000 students. So when we have a post that reaches 10,000 or 20,000 people, we're pretty excited. And we have a long way to go, and we're still kind of building a sharing culture. But people, what we've found so far is that people just really love to celebrate their schools. They love to share good news. They love to talk about what we're doing and what we're doing well, and that really helps us tell the story of our schools and our district in a way that we really never could before. And our stories are reaching more people than ever. And really that's kind of what it's all about is being able to tell that story. So that's kind of been our district's experience. I'd love to answer any questions if any of you have any.
Well, yes, Angela, hey, it's Morgan. First of all, great job. We do have some questions coming in, folks. We've got about 5 minutes for Q&A here, so we're going to tee that up with these folks here right now. So, Angela, actually, we did have a question come in from Kyle Leonard, and it looks like Lamani School, Community School. He had a question that said, who is in charge of posting to the district school Facebook page? So, obviously, you've got somebody's posting to it. What do you do? How do you do it? What kind of policies do you have around who can post and who's in charge of posting?
So we have our community relations department posts to our district account, so our district Facebook page. But each individual school has their own account, and they are in charge. We require that an administrator be an admin on, say, a Facebook page or have at least password access to a school-wide account. But for the most part, the schools can add additional people. Some schools have a librarian, teacher. They have a kind of a team of people who post on there, but just a couple administrators. So it really varies. And I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and Kyle, let us know if that didn't. Hey, but Angela, I'm going to take moderator's prerogative for a second and kind of pull out a comment about something you talked about, parents opting out, because I think the issue of privacy is a big concern for a lot of parents in this day and age, because we get issues of people online looking for people that they shouldn't be. So, I mean, how many of the parents that you deal with have opted out? I mean, what percentage? Is it a small percentage, large percentage? And how do you answer questions around that about how do you protect the privacy of your students?
It is an incredibly small percentage. Most of our parents are really excited to see their kids or to see what's going on in their schools and their classroom. But we have had questions about how we protect their privacy, and that one, like we said, we follow the same federal guidelines. If you don't want your child out there, there is a process for you to do. You just fill out a form, and then we take them out of all communications. Some have had a little bit of difficulty with that because this includes taking their picture out of the yearbook as well as out of programs and out of the websites. But the reason that we do that is that those publications, even though they kind of seem like just print publications, once they're out there, we can't control what happens to it afterwards. We can't control another parent taking a picture of the yearbook or from a yearbook and posting it on their own social media accounts at varying privacy levels. So, that's kind of how we address that portion of it.
Very good. Hey, Marcel DeMaio, Holy Family Catholic School, has a question. Said, have your schools created both public Facebook presences as well as private spaces for school family? And I'm assuming that, Marcel, you're talking about like the private Facebook group. So is everything you do public, or do you have private groups for conversations that might be or necessary to be held offline?
The vast majority of our school presences are public Facebook presences. However, some of our sports teams do have private spaces for school families, and that's mostly just because they have so much more information to share with them. But most of it's public. And some of our classroom teachers are also kind of having those private spaces.
And we've got another one in here, too. A very popular topic today here, Angela. So Ray Garza, Oxnard School District, asked how to ensure permissions are in place for a student image on Facebook or broadcasts that are posted on YouTube. I think that goes back to what you're saying when you collect information. So can you just walk through that a little bit more, explain how when you post something, do you make sure that you actually have permission before you post that student information?
We actually have an opt-out policy. So we send a letter home at the beginning of every school year, and we let them know that their child's image could be used. There could be a reporter in the school. We could be taking pictures and posting it on district social media. And if you don't want that to happen, then you have to opt out.
Okay, so more of they have to take an affirmative action to opt out. Otherwise, by default, you're saying that they'll be included.
Correct. And we do have some schools that, that do make a note of parents who say, I want my kid in the yearbook, but I don't really want them on your Facebook page, and they kind of track that individually. And and teachers have a good relationship generally with their, we hope they have a good relationship with their parents and can understand and reflect that.
Yeah, and last question here we've got time for. Like I said, we've got a lot of questions coming in, but this is a good one here too. So, I know a lot of people have to deal with negative comments, deal with what we call trolls, people who just kind of looking to pick a fight. So have you had to deal with those folks, and kind of what do you do to respond to that? And we've got about 30 seconds here before we move on to the next speaker.
On the district level, we have had a couple controversies that we've had to respond to on our district accounts, and really what we do is we just treat each situation individually. Our first response is to respond and respond quickly. We don't have to give them a full answer, but we do want to let them know that we're listening and that we're paying attention, and we try to take hot topics offline, and we give people phone numbers and say, please call us. Or we try to message them privately and say, we would love to talk to you, and let's talk more about this. If it's a misperception, we'll correct it. If we did something very wrong, we generally try to apologize and move on. And if it's, we try to be brief but responsive.
And Angela, just great information. Like I said, we could go through a lot of this more, but look, folks, thank you for this. There's a lot of good information here, folks. Keep your questions coming in. We'll get to as many as we can. So now it's my distinct honor to actually introduce the next speaker, and the next speaker is Anil Chawla. He is the founder and CEO of ArchiveSocial. It is always great when we can get the founder and owner on. But before I give you Anil's full bio, let's go to another quick survey here. So what is your opinion on social media as a public record? So do you believe it is definitely a public record by law? You think it might be a record, but your activity is not worth retaining? You feel strongly that it is not a public record, or you don't know? So it's definitely a public record, might be a record, but not worth retaining. You feel strongly it's not a public record, or you don't know. And while your answers are coming in, let me tell you a little bit about Anil. Anil is the founder and CEO of ArchiveSocial, the public sector's leading provider of technology that helps government agencies archive and manage risk. And folks, that's the important word, risk, related to social media. ArchiveSocial has enabled hundreds of government agencies, such as Volusia County Schools in Florida, Upper Arlington Schools, Ohio, Tacoma Public Schools in Washington, and the U.S. Department of Justice, which, by the way, is the world's largest law firm, maintain records of social media for legal protection and public records requirements. Now, the company was selected for the prestigious Code for America Accelerator in 2013. In 2014, they were recognized as a cool vendor in government by leading analyst firm Gartner, and honored as a GovTech 100 company. Earlier this year, they kept the streak going by Government Technology Magazine. He is also the co-host of the very popular GovTech Social podcast, one that I've had the opportunity to be on. So let's take a look at the survey results here real quick, Neil. So it looks like 58% of the folks feel it's definitely a public record by law. Nobody said that it was a record but not worth retaining. About 11% feel strongly it's not a public record. Or, Anil, here's another one, too, and I think this is a good area to dive into. 30% of the people said they weren't sure if it was a public record or not. So I'm pretty sure you're going to have something to say about that. So, Anil, let me turn the floor over to you.
Well, Morgan, thank you so much for the introduction. You're absolutely right. A silver lining of that poll is that we will be spending some time talking about social media as a record. And I hope to clarify the stance on that in terms of how records bodies across the country are looking at this issue. Now, before I jump into this, I do want to take a moment to thank our other participants, both Angela and Lisa, for joining us here today. Angela, a fantastic job in the presentation. I found it extremely compelling to hear the business case for social media, how your school district broke down the issues and approached them, and then to hear the success. So for those of you who are not yet participating on social media, definitely a blueprint there for how your school or school district might approach it. And also I want to mention that Lisa is our next presenter after me. This is a 90-minute webinar that we have today, a 90-minute training, so we'll go past the hour. And if you don't know Lisa or the Wake County Public Schools social media presence, I highly recommend you stick around for that. One of the leading social media presences in the nation, and they've done some outstanding work there. Now, one of the things that Angela said, she made a great case for social media, the benefits, and how it's been successful for her and her schools. But she mentioned that it's not all sunshine and roses, and so I get the honor of talking about the other side, those legal issues, those policy challenges. But again, my intention here is to lay it all out in front of you, provide clarity and an action plan for addressing those issues. And the way I'll do that is I'll start with some real-life examples and case studies. Angela mentioned that there isn't a lot of case law, particularly in education, but there's certainly case law in government around social media as a record. We'll also talk about how social media can constitute and does constitute public record in the use that schools and school systems have. And then based on that, we'll dive into how you can mitigate that risk, primarily through the use of archiving and record keeping, the same way you do that with email, but how do you do that with social media? And I'll actually spend a bit of time giving you some tips on what to look for in an archiving approach. In full disclosure, ArchiveSocial is a vendor that provides archiving technology for public sector education. But what I want to do here is give you the guidelines, the principles to look for in any record-keeping approach, whether that's with us or with anybody else, to help you minimize risk for your agency in a way that saves you time and ultimately saves you headache and expense down the road. This slide mentions an automated archive, but given the amount of a demo of an automated archive that's live. Given the amount of content that we have here, I'll have to pass on the demo, but we'll provide some links to archives that you can take a look at yourself, and certainly want to take time to answer your questions. So please continue to use that Q&A window. So let's start with where the poll left us, which is on that question of social media as a public record. And I know about 40% of you either felt that it's not a record or you're just not sure. And so I want to present some guidance to you to clarify that issue. And I'll give you one example out of the state of California. And I use this example because throughout the country, every state has records laws. Now, those of you in the state of Washington, the state of Florida, you know that your states, more than others, have had a lot of instances in case law around public records in general. And I wanted to share California just as another example, but effectively every state in the country has a records law that looks a lot like this, where the records law was written maybe 3-4 decades ago, and written in a format that defines public records as anything related to the business of your agency, whether it's communication that you send or communication that you receive. It's related to you conducting the business of your agency, and regardless of physical form, it can constitute a record. So in other words, a complaint from a parent, whether that complaint comes in on a piece of paper or an email or a Twitter direct message, a complaint is a complaint, regardless of physical form. It's that content that really matters. Similarly with public safety type issues that may involve one of your schools, a crime tip coming in, again, on an email or a Facebook private message, it doesn't really matter what form that is. It's the nature of the content, the fact that it's a crime tip, that defines it as a public record. So social media can absolutely create public records if any of the content that transpires across social media, again, content that you either send or content that you receive from a student or a teacher or really any citizen, could constitute public record based on the content of that message. Now, that's an interpretation of that long-standing records law in California, similar to other records laws. So I wanted to take it a step further because state after state after state has also come out with guidance emphasizing that that is the correct interpretation of the records law, that yes, in fact, social media can constitute public record. And so in your state, I'd encourage you to look for this guidance. It may be available from your Secretary of State or your archives or records office. But let me give you an example here from California, where in California we have the Records Information Management guidance, and there's actually an electronic records guidebook that really details when social media will constitute record, and then emphasizes the point that the fact that is important, but also that you have to have that record. You can't just leave that on Facebook or Twitter. So in CalRIM's guidance, they actually emphasize that you need a plan to export the records into some kind of record-keeping system. Now, I mentioned that in your state, one of your authorities at the state level has likely defined guidance that further clarifies social media as a record. And so rather than send you off on your own Google searching, ArchiveSocial has done a lot of work around this to consolidate the guidance and information that's been published by state agencies. So this is, again, official guidance. We've just consolidated it. And we have this US map. After this presentation, we'll send out a link to this as well as a presentation. But basically, when you get this slide deck, you can either click on any of these states or click on the resources link that we have and review the guidance that's specific to your state that applies to your use of social media. So that is the academic view of social media as a record. So some of you may be wondering, what does reality look like, and when in fact are we creating records, if at all? And so I took a few moments to put together some examples, and it wasn't hard at all looking at some of the agencies that we're familiar with, some that are participating here with us today, for example, Wake County Public Schools, and pull out content that could constitute public record. Again, if you think about the public records law as it applies to email or any other format, it's information that pertains to your agency, the business of your agency, that's based on its content may be worth keeping for a certain amount of time. It's not just administrative value, and it's a unique record. And so I wanted to share some examples that may have constituted a record based on how social media is being used in education. Angela kind of emphasized the point around lockdowns and other issues, and so just recently looked at the Wake County school site, and again they had an issue where they've done a phenomenal job of keeping parents informed and informed them of this temporary shut lockdown. And on social media, provided the update that the lockdown had been lifted. So again, this is how people are getting information today. They're not going to your website per se. They're not proactively looking for it, but they're on Facebook and Twitter and other sites, and they'll hopefully see it in their streams as you post and it's being shared. Another example, this is out of, again, another agency that's not with us today, but is active on social media. And in fact, this is the Austin Independent School District. And then they have a dedicated police presence on social media where they're providing updates about a wanted suspect. In fact, the original tweet had a birth date in there that was incorrect. They first posted about it, then they used social media to clarify that person's date of birth, and then they use social media to provide an instant update. Again, social media is probably the best way to break news and keep people informed by having that ability to broadcast the content in near real time. So it makes a lot of sense being used in this way, but we have to remember this creates records of value and public records that must be maintained. Coming back to some of the friends that we have here with us today, Central Kitsap had this post on social media, and unfortunately, again, another lockdown situation. But what's interesting about this, the reason I use this example is that the original post for the school was actually about something else, right? It was not about a lockdown, but it was talking about earthquake preparation. And then a parent used that as a forum to ask about a lockdown. My daughter has informed me that they're on lockdown. What's going on? And then the school district, being as responsive as they are in social, was able to provide clarification. So again, a gentle reminder that the way, and we've all seen this with our own social networking activity, is that the conversation doesn't follow the format that you want it to follow. It follows what people care about. And so even if they care about this earthquake event, but they had this sudden question, they may ask you about something else on the same thread, and it may turn that original post now into a record because of questions that are being asked, communications that are happening, and are not being recorded anywhere else but here on social media. And one final example, and again, we'll use a non-lockdown example where there's just weather. There are situations that schools have to inform the public, particularly the students and the parents in regards to severe weather may impacting an event. And again, a great use of social media here by Central Kitsap of providing the heads up that this may change and then providing the ultimate update on what exactly happened. And then actually saying in this last comment, we'll post the impact to school and the updates on our Facebook page first. So again, social media being a primary channel, not just a duplicate channel. So being a primary channel is creating new records and records of value that must be archived as public records. So hopefully it gives you some real examples for all of you to look at your own presence and think about how are you using social media. And again, if you're providing information in a breaking news type fashion, public safety information in a breaking news type fashion, providing any type of clarification related to events or situations, it's very likely that you're generating public records. Now, that ultimately leads to the question of, does it matter? It's on Facebook or Twitter. Are people asking for it? And we have seen this throughout the country. ArchiveSocial first started working with cities and counties about 4 or 5 years ago, and there weren't many examples, but today we have dozens of case studies on this. And the broad example that I want to give you is that even if you're not receiving records requests that are specifically asking for tweets, as we see in this example, even if you're not getting anything specific about your social media, many times agencies get records requests that are today including social media because of how pervasive social media is. And so if you look at this list of examples, any and all documents that relate to all reports of the incident, so all reports of the school lockdown, would certainly include all of the updates that you put on your Facebook page and your Twitter account. So you have to think about it that way. Even if someone's not going to ask you for the physical format that it came in, they're asking you for that communication, and you have to think about how much social media played into the communication on that topic. So now I want to provide just a few quick case studies of the bright side of this, which is this is a real challenge. It may seem like an overwhelming thing to keep records of everything on social media, and we're going to talk about how we make this really easy. And if you do act proactively on this and put the right policies and procedures in place, then the reward is immense. And in fact, you would save yourself a lot of time and heartache down the road. And so a few quick examples here. And this is out of government in general to give you an idea. One of our customers in Margate, Florida, was having an issue with a citizen that kept promoting their local online news site and local business. So they were basically spamming. So again, spam is something that permeates, unfortunately, everything, including the social presence for your schools and your district. It's happening to the city, and Margate started to remove that content because it was against their policy. You can't just spam. And the citizen actually said, hey, this is Florida. We take our records law seriously here, and you can't remove my content. And I'm sort of paraphrasing for the citizen. And Margate responded back saying, no, actually, we keep records because Margate uses ArchiveSocial. And the citizen then came back and issued a records request and said, well, I think you're singling me out. And I want you to produce every instance of you hiding or removing someone's comment off of Facebook in this given time frame. And so, again, having that record-keeping system in place was just a few clicks here and there, and Margate could deal with the situation and get this problematic citizen off their backs and be able to enforce their policy in an effective fashion. All the way across the country in Spokane, Washington, I wanted to give this example. So I think this also, you can see a lot of ways in this will make sense for a school or a school district. Basically, cities, counties, state agencies, and schools are all mentioning the events that are happening. And in this case, Spokane, Washington had been using Facebook to provide information related to an annual kayaking trip. And unfortunately, in one of those instances, a young man actually fell off of the kayak and died of hypothermia. And the lawsuit from the family actually said, look, we don't think that this event should have happened when it did. We want every communication about this event, how you promoted it, all the safety notices. We want all this off whenever you mentioned on your Facebook page in the last 2 years. So again, it's not even public records. It's simply having records of what you're doing, because it could lead to social media could be involved in a legal situation, whether it's a public records request or not. In this case, it was not a public records request per se. It was a discovery request. And again, Spokane had decided to proactively employ ArchiveSocial and the Social Media Archive before they had ever had an issue before. And in fact, 6 months after they put the archive in place, this discovery request came in. And if you read this case study, they talk about how in the state of Washington there are time limits. You have to turn around this information a certain amount of time or you'll get fined. And they said that without an archiving system in place, they don't think they would have been able to meet those time limits, if at all, produce the information. So again, 2 examples and links to more information about them that have been published by Government Technology. But now what I want to do is switch gears, and I want to talk about solving this problem in a way that's simple and cost-effective, because again, the benefits of social media are undeniable. And when something comes up that relates to a legal issue or a public records request, you want to be in the position that you can handle it, just like you've been able to with email and other types of content. And you don't want to be in the position where that one request brings you down, takes up your time, costs you a lot of money, and perhaps even requires you to limit what you do on social media. That would be a very unfortunate consequence. So how do you get around that? Well, the first thing we have to do is acknowledge that you can't rely on Facebook or Twitter to have this content for you. Now, one of the things that you can do is go look at Facebook's policies and Twitter's policies, and what you will not find is any guarantee or language that these networks will have the records that you're supposed to have. There's no guarantee in any of the terms of services on the policies that Facebook will simply hold on to the information. In fact, when you go to Facebook's website, particularly for law enforcement, Facebook details that law enforcement can absolutely issue a subpoena for content, but that Facebook advises law enforcement issue the subpoena before anything is deleted. Meaning once it's deleted, it could be gone forever. And so what we did at ArchiveSocial, we actually conducted a study on this in the month of January of this year. Wanted to see, well, how often does content get deleted rather than just being hidden or just kept up there? How often does it actually get deleted from the network? Because practically every agency that we work with tells us they never delete anything they post. Well, we ran this for a month. We sampled 400 public agencies in that 1 month, and in that 1 month, 400 agencies had nearly 7,800 records deleted from Facebook. Now, our technology is able to detect this right away and record it. And when we looked at it, not every agency had a deletion, but 3 out of 4 did. So majority of agencies had at least something get deleted. Some of the agencies had dozens of items deleted from their Facebook. And when you talk to these agencies, they'll tell you, again, we don't delete content. We don't delete what we say. We don't delete what our citizens say. But we forget that the citizens can delete what they're saying, right? A citizen can send you a crime tip and then change their mind and delete it, and then you've lost an incredibly important record. Or a parent can issue a set of complaints, and as you're clarifying it and providing updates, they can delete what they actually said and change the entire nature of that conversation. And so this is the kind of stuff that we're seeing happen, from simple mistakes to people actually deleting content of real value. And we continue to monitor this, and data is being deleted at every moment. And so you have to get this information in your control per your records requirements. Well, how do you do that? It does come down to social media archiving. Again, there are a variety of ways to approach this, and what I will do today is arm you with a methodology of how to think about this. What are the core principles to get this right? And I'll lay that out there right from the beginning. When ArchiveSocial approached this issue, we discovered 4 factors that we found to be critical to social media. Some of them overlap with how you keep records of other content types, but you have to remember that unlike email and files, social is the one content type that's out of your control. Your IT department doesn't set up a server for Facebook. Facebook runs this, Twitter runs this, and they own the content until you take control. So to start with, you need to get this data in your control very frequently. The longer you take, the more likely it can be lost. You need to be comprehensive. You're broadcasting this information in public. Not only can you post to Facebook, but your parents and teachers can at any time from any device, and all of that could constitute record, either for public records or for legal needs. So you want to get as much of it as you can. And as Angela mentioned, in certain states, the Supreme Courts have ruled that even the electronic metadata of the record is part of the public record. Now, if you're not familiar with metadata, I'll cover that in a minute. Authenticity, ultimately, if you're going to have this kind of record keeping, you want it to be legally sound, and you want to be able to use it in court. And then finally, context. You want to be able to make sense of this information. If you're producing a Facebook conversation from years ago with hundreds of comments, how do you do that? And so I'll give you a couple of quick examples. You want to look for archiving technology that goes back, because you've probably already been on social networking. And if you start archiving today, you don't want to lose that history. This is actually a screenshot from when Facebook was first launched. And we have archiving technology that can go back to the beginning of your presence and get everything that the network still provides to us through the means that we access it. You want to remember that social media has more than just a timeline. There are photo albums, there's private messaging, even stuff that you favorite might be looked at as an endorsement. So you want to be very comprehensive there. And then frequency, you want to look for technology that captures social media in near real time. As soon as it gets up there, and within moments, it needs to be in an archive or you risk losing it. You also want to focus again on issues like metadata. And real quick here, a tweet has 126 characters, but that electronic record actually has more than 2,000 characters of information like timestamps and user IDs. So not only what you see on the screen, but the actual electronic record and some of that technical information behind it could be part of the public record. You have to remember that. So it's not as simple as saying, oh yeah, we just back up Facebook. Facebook has all sorts of complexity to it. Every network has complexity to it. So Facebook, as an example, is you can now, for years, you've been able to reply to comments. Does your archiving technology get those multi-level comments and replies? Does your archiving technology get multimedia, not only in the original post, but embedded multimedia in the comments that come in? Do you deal with live streams? How do you deal with these short URLs that really obfuscate what that social media post was about? So it is really about the details, because ultimately with any legal situation, the devil is in the details. So look for archiving technology that doesn't just say they grab Facebook and store it somewhere, but they really prove to you that they capture the details and have you covered from front to back in terms of how people are using social media today. And finally, you want to be able to not just store data, you want to be able to retrieve it and replay it. Again, social media is an ongoing conversation. So this is an Instagram comment. You need to be able to replay that back to the original Instagram thread. Not only be able to do that online, but when you produce this information for your lawyers or for a journalist or for anyone else who's asking for it, it can be really hard to make sense of the social media conversation. If you do a search and you find some comments that match, you can't just give them the comments, because then they'll ask you, well, what conversation are these comments from? What else was said? So look for technology that reconstructs the conversation for you. In this case, this is the records request from Margate related to the content that was deleted by that spammer. And so this search was done for the deletions, because that's what was asked for. But when it was exported to a PDF, as you see on the left side, we reconstructed it back to the original conversations and then highlighted the actual information that met the records request. So you want to look for technology that really replays social media and provides that context. And then finally, there are other issues here but that can be solved with an archive. It's not just about storing data and responding reactively when asked for it. You're centralizing data in one place that's in your control. So you can do things like set up alerts when someone is using profanity on your social media presence or asking you a question, or if there's an emergency management event, and even run analytics on that data. So these are all capabilities that are enabled that can further your social media strategy once you're archiving the data and you have it in your control. Now, and I'm right about time. The last thing I want to say is that we at ArchiveSocial truly operate ourselves as a resource to the public sector. And so while we have commercial offerings, I want to make you aware of this, a very special offering, which ultimately recognizes the fact that in crisis, social media matters more than any other time. So if you're in crisis, it's likely that you will face legal requests and public records requests. And if you're not archiving at the time that you're in a crisis situation, you can go to this website. It will actually provide access to our technology at no cost, no obligation, to help you get through that crisis for 30 days so you're protected from records requests and any other legal situations that may arise. It's just our way of giving back to the public sector and to encourage the use of social media throughout public sector and education. So with that, here's my contact information. We'll open up for questions.
Hey, Anil, great job. And actually, there are a lot of good questions that came in. And so let's dive right in. So we had Melanie Fraser, McFadder Technical College. You were actually talking about spam a little bit earlier, Anil, and she said that they have that spamming too. After a while, she usually blocks them or hides their posts. So her question was, is that wrong? It doesn't happen often, but what are some of the challenges with spam if you don't block it as well as if you do block it? And she's asking, is that wrong? I don't know if it's wrong or not, but what has been your experience when you've dealt with some of those issues?
Great question, Melanie. And my first disclaimer will be that obviously I'm not your attorney, and so I can share what I'm hearing from other agencies, but ultimately it's up to your agency. And where you would start, again, with your attorney is on your policy. So the first thing to do is establish a policy that spells out what is allowed and what's not. And certainly you want that policy to talk about solicitation and spam-like material can be removed. So that gives you that go-ahead. And then you absolutely have the ability to enforce your policy. This is a limited public forum. And an agency that we work with, once they have that policy in place, they definitely hide content. And if it gets severe, that if there's a repeat offender, you keep telling them, hey, you're violating their policy, and they keep doing it, that is grounds for blocking them. You, again, want to put that in your policy. And so with archiving technology, it gives you the ability. In fact, we have had customers that when they block somebody, the reporting and the recreation of that content in the archive allowed them to go to the attorney and said, okay, I want to block this person, and here's exactly what they've done to us in the last 6 months on our social media presence in terms of violating our policy. And the attorney has a very easy ask there to say yes or no. And so absolutely encourage that, but you have to start with a good policy. And I'll throw in there, Morgan, that we'll make available the social media policy template that we've put together really by looking at what agencies are doing. We've consolidated best practices, and we make that freely available, so we'll share that out.
Yeah, and that's great because as I even said in mine, Anil, too, as well, I've talked about policy. First thing, you folks, you just listen to what Anil said. You got to have those policies in place, too. So, hey, this is a follow-on comment from Marcel DeMaio, Holy Family Catholic, which is a private, I believe, private school, talking about it's their understanding that archiving is a requirement for public schools and that laws vary from state to state, asking if that's true. I think that's true, but then the question is, what have you seen between public and private schools or public and private entities, if you've dealt with that yet? And then also, the follow-up was that, is the account timeline on Facebook considered an archive for public record purposes?
Okay, yeah, so important distinction there between public and private. And so a large portion of what I focused on was around public records laws, which only apply, again, to public entities. It would not apply to private schools. So from a public records legal compliance requirement, as a private school, that does not apply to you. And while the laws, for the public schools, while the laws vary across state to state, they basically say the same thing, and state after state has come out with virtually the same guidance that social media constitutes public record. So again, public schools, you definitely have to deal with it as a public record. Now, for the private schools, there's this other issue of legal risk, and that's really, in terms of your appetite for risk and how you guys manage risk in your organization. We do work with private entities that are not mandated to keep records, but they know that legal situations come up and that there will be two sides to the story, and the only way to tell your side of the story is to have complete records. And so that's usually what drives the private institutions to employ archiving. And Morgan, on the second question of is your Facebook timeline an archive, the answer is a resounding no. It's something that's natural for a lot of people to assume. In fact, most agencies we start working with actually ask that question, well, why can't I just have it on Facebook? And it really does go back to that study that I shared, where you hope that it's on Facebook, but there's no guarantee that it'll be there. And certainly if anyone deletes, changes anything, then that record is lost. And so you have to get it in your control. In fact, many states in their public records guidelines have said that a plan to export the records must be put in place. Certain states have really called out the fact that the TOS, terms of service, on these sites does not provide the level of guarantee that you need to comply with the laws. So you definitely want to get the records in your hands and not rely on the timeline.
Yeah, absolutely, and I can tell you, and talking to people who do marketing and stuff in the industry and rely on Facebook, they are changing their algorithms, changing things on a regular basis, folks. It is a constant struggle. So, Anil, that's great guidance. Hey, we've got about 45 seconds left here, Anil, but I do want to get to you because we're dealing a lot with public entities, public schools, even private schools. Everybody's budget conscious. So, from your standpoint, real quick, from the ArchiveSocial, how do you guys price this? How do you cost it? And what is the installation process involved? In other words, how easy, how tough is it to get started?
Sure, happy to answer that. So our pricing, first of all, is available online on our website. We sell transparency, so our pricing is completely transparent. And the way that it works is on the volume of activity you have. Typically, we work with school districts, and so when you're covering a whole set of schools, a school might add another Facebook page or Twitter account or Instagram account. And so we don't want to sit there charging you every time you add another page because that's a procurement process. It's a real challenge. So working with public sector, we design it so that you fit into a bucket of, say, 1,000 records a month, 3,000 records a month, 10,000 records a month. Once you're in that bucket, you can add as many profiles as you need as your schools evolve and embrace social media. And it's a fixed cost. We don't have any of the setup fees or anything like that. So it's very predictable and easy. And in terms of being easy and setting this up, and Angela can talk to this as well, but basically most of our agencies will set this up in less than 20 minutes if you have access to the credentials. We give you a link to our service, which is hosted online in the cloud. And it's a couple of clicks, get your accounts in there, and then we take care of the rest. So it's extremely easy and something that you can actually sneak in the middle of other projects.
Yeah, and that actually goes too with your crisis support services. Pretty much operates the same way, right? Very easy to set up. You can be up and running very quickly.
That's right. If you're in crisis, again, whether a real-world crisis or, in fact, a viral crisis that's manufactured on social media, if you go to that website and fill out the form, we'll be in touch within 24 hours, and then we send you that link and we get you up and running, again, within minutes, protecting your presence.
That sounds great, Anil. Hey, thanks. And folks, a lot of good stuff there. Take advantage of Anil's information there. So now let's move on to our third speaker. This is one, folks, stay tuned here. A lot more good stuff coming. So we have Lisa Luten, and she's the Communications Director for Wake County Public School System. And before I introduce her, let's get to our final poll question here, and then I'll give you her background. So what are the biggest challenges for your school district when it comes to social media? This one you can choose all that apply. So enforcing your social media policy and keeping our presence clean, there's that word policy again, folks. Staying responsive to student and parents, communicating what's happening on social media to my leadership, or concerns about legal risks and compliance with public records laws. So is it enforcing social media policy, keeping your presence clean, staying responsive to students and parents, communicating what's happening on social media, or concerns about legal risk and compliance with public records law? As you are answering that, let me introduce you to Lisa. Lisa Luten is the Communications Director and Spokesperson for Wake County Public School System, North Carolina, which, by the way, folks, is the 16th largest public school system in the United States. Lisa has led the district's public relations efforts, their media relationships, strategic outreach, and online presence since 2012, managing an award-winning team of communicators who believe that innovative communications can improve the educational outcome of students. Now, before entering service in public education, Lisa served as a communication manager for VIF, Internal Education, a private education agency. So that's also a good take. Now we get both the public and the private side. So Lisa, let's take a look at the results here real quick. So we look at that, about half the folks say it's about enforcing social media policy and keeping their presence clean. 62% say it's staying responsive to students and parents. That's great. About the same amount say it's communicating what's happening on social media to their leadership. But 75% of the people, it's concerns about legal risk and compliance with public records law. So it looks like we did strike a nerve there. So Lisa, I'm going to turn this over to you for the next 20 minutes.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So what we're going to focus on is really talking about how to leverage social media to connect with families. And I wanted to start by talking about who we are. So we are the 16th largest school district in the United States. We've got about 160,000 students. As of this year, we have 177 schools, and we're building on average 3 to 5 schools a year. And our community for the past 10 years has been the fastest growing metropolitan area in the nation. So what that means for us is that we're growing, and our growth includes folks that aren't familiar with our community. They don't know us, and we don't know them. And so for us, that makes good communication an imperative. We have a strong focus in our district on parent engagement and making sure that parents understand what's happening in their schools and how they can support their kids. And social media for us and our 153,000 Twitter followers is a big part of how we make that happen. So speaking of those Twitter followers, we are hella proud of that. It's the largest Twitter following of any school district. We actually, because we're obnoxious, went out and measured all of the Twitter followers for universities. We are the largest if we compared ourselves to universities. We have more followers than our own statewide newspaper, and we're neck to neck with our local TV media. So that's important to us because what it means is that our voice matters, and it gives us the power and the voice to share our own message directly with the people that we care about. So, speaking of that, I wanted to talk a little bit about how that happened and how we gained our large following in social media. So BuzzFeed wrote an article about us a couple years ago that perfectly summarized our experience. Back in the day, they mention it that we were a county who just dealt with crazy eggs and cool moms. It's true. We use social media to share information. We literally posted media releases into Facebook posts, and we only occasionally responded. And then one day, the weather started to get really bad, and me and my team were locked up in a room waiting for our school superintendent to cancel school. And this is an experience that I'm sure everybody can relate to. We were waiting, and while we were waiting, our children and our students started to get really obnoxious on Twitter. And I say that with love. They were seriously obnoxious, and they started to constantly tweet messages at us. So the second image in here is BuzzFeed's example of some of the messages that they tweeted to us. The twerk tweets on the slides are just a tiny slice of the pie of their level of absurdity. So while we were waiting, we decided to let them know that we were around, we were listening to them. There's only so much you can say about snow, so the BuzzFeed article describes it as us finding our inner sassy, and it's true. What we know is that we love our children and our kids love us, and for us that manifests itself as sassy love. And so when you're sitting in a room waiting for 4 hours in front of a computer for the call to come in, there's not much else to do except correct the typos and have fun with our kids. So for us, every snow day is like Twitter Christmas. We gain thousands of followers and we have a good time. But sassy aside, what that moment really taught us is that in PR, we spend a lot of time thinking about how we can get other folks to share our stuff, right? How can we get the media to pick up our press releases? How can we get parents to read our brochures? When really what we learned is that it's not that hard. Social media for us levels the playing field, and it allows us to reach our students and our parents directly, and that we find really powerful. So I personally find before and after photos really helpful. So then I thought I would share mine. The left is my first grade photo, and that's Mrs. Noyes, my teacher in the white jumpsuit. And then on the right are my old Facebook posts. And I think I mentioned I literally copied and pasted news releases in our Facebook. So back in the day, we were super popular. We had 25 followers, and I think I count my mom on one of those 25. I use this slide to illustrate that for us, change was not easy. That first grade photo was taken literally down the street from my current office. I'm a product of my own school district, and my teachers that I had back then are my bosses today. So when we decided to make a shift and change our social media strategy, I got called into my old high school principal's office. He literally said to me what I'm pretty sure was the exact same thing he told me back when I was in high school, which was, Lisa, I'm not sure what you think you're doing, but you better not be causing any trouble. So what are we doing? Our social media strategy is pretty simple. We've got really short rules. You can call this slide how to get over 100,000 Twitter followers overnight. Rule number 1 is be responsive. If somebody talks to you, talk back. It doesn't really matter what they're saying. Let them know that you're live and that somebody is sitting on the other side. We follow this rule 99% of the time. The only exception, of course, is when you have legitimate trolls. We are not required to talk back to bullies. Rule 2, have a conversation. Social media is just a conversation that you're having over the computer. So in real life, if somebody came up to you in a party and started talking, you would talk back. Social media is the same thing. So for us, what that means is that it requires a conversational tone. We aren't computers. We're not press releases. We're people. And so we try to make sure that on social media we act like that. And depending on your culture, that can be very shocking to people. Government folks, we have a perception of being frustrating. We're supposed to hand folks forms. We're supposed to tell folks to wait in line. And I'm not going to lie, we still do that because change takes time, but we don't have to do that. So rule number 3, listen. For us, this is the most important rule. Folks are talking about us, and that's really what they're thinking. So it's important that we listen, and what that means is that for us, we listen especially to our parents because it is critical and it's vital that we are on the same page with them. So speaking of parents, Angela covered a lot of this, but social media, parents are on it. They spend almost 2 hours a day, so take that in, think about it, and think about in those 2 hours, what is it that we as school personnel need them to be doing? So we asked ourselves that question, and what we came up with is strategies that I'm sure every single school has, which is we need them to be engaged in their student learning. Students learn better when they have engaged parents. The National Center for Education Statistics has studied this. I think everybody has studied this. Everybody knows that parental involvement in school strongly correlates with higher grade point averages. So what we focused on, it's nice to share information, and we do that, and that's really a lot of what we do. But our schools and our teachers and our principals came together and decided, how can we use social media to make sure that our parents are engaged with the classroom? These questions are really how we define and measure parent engagement. We actually measure these every year and ask our parents these questions. So when talking to our schools and coming up with our social media strategy on parent engagement, what we try to do is really give them some concrete, easy examples that our teachers can use in the classroom to affect these metrics. Our teachers are busy, so we can't give them a lot. So I'm going to walk through with y'all what we give our teachers. So the first metric, do parents know what is going on in their schools? This is a picture of Muriel Summers. She's the principal of Combs Elementary School in Raleigh, North Carolina. She's a national leader in education. Her school has been named the National Magnet School of the Year multiple times. So she's a big deal, and she really believes in making sure that parents understand what's happening in her school. That's a critical component to her success. So her school is very active both on Facebook and on Twitter. You can find them at Combs Catchup, and their parents are active followers of their posts. What we try to tell our schools is that they don't need 100,000 followers. They really just need the followers that matter. And for our elementary schools, that's their parents and their grandparents and people who are engaged in those students' lives. So every day, the school shares exactly what the students are working on. Most of their teachers have social media accounts, and they share photos and videos with their parents of just everyday activities. This one's a typical Facebook post, and this one was done as a Facebook Live video. Every day at Combs on Friday, the kids do karaoke at lunch, and it is a good time. If you're ever in Raleigh, call me and I'll invite you. What I love about this post is that in our district, we're really Facebook Live crazy. For us, live streaming is everything, and it's really what we're focusing on. Parents want to know that their kids are safe and happy, and in public schools, that's really half of the battle. How can you communicate with parents and let them know that their kids are safe and that their kids are learning? And so live streaming really allows us to show our parents what the school building is really like. It's unedited, which means it comes with risk, but it also comes with such great reward because it's the truth, and the truth builds trust, and trust is good. So we allow our teachers to live stream. Yes, we have to make sure that they have permission, so we reduce that risk, but focus more on the reward, which is how can we make sure that our parents are active and can see what's happening in our classroom. All right. So our engagement metric number 2 is, do teachers provide information about student learning? So this is Carroll Middle School. Carroll was named a Verizon Digital Promise School a couple of years back. What that means is that every student has their own tablet, and they have free wireless access both at school and at home. Carroll has a high population of disadvantaged students, and they struggle with traditional ways of parent engagement. In fact, they had a new principal. Their principal's been there for a couple of years, and she was so frustrated at not having parents show up for parent night and having to literally sit there by herself that she decided a couple of years ago to flip it. And now what she does is she takes a bus out and she travels and visits each of the students at their house. So for Carroll, knowing that it's hard for them to get parents into the school building, social media is a key part of their strategy. Every teacher has an account. Every teacher shares information directly with parents about the nuts and bolts of what's happening in their classroom. They share their Twitter handle with their parents just like they would share their email address, and they relentlessly push information to their parents about students' learning. So, as any parent who's on the call knows, when you ask your kid what happened at school today, you often hear nothing. And that's not the truth. There's really great learning that's happening in our schools. And so what we want to do is give parents the power to help engage their kids. So the middle photo shows a science classroom, and they did a Shark Tank challenge. So parents are able to see this, and they're able to go home and ask their kids specific questions like, what business idea did your team pitch? And these are the conversations that we really need so that parents can get connected to the classroom and be active participants in their kids' education. All right, metric number 3 that we measure, Does the school encourage parent involvement? This is Joyner Elementary School. It's another magnet school in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is a killer fun school. They throw a really good party, and they throw lots of parties. They believe strongly in building community and in getting folks together, and they take every opportunity to get parents into the school building. That is a key part of their strategy to make sure that kids are successful. So this is an example of their food truck frenzy. I'm 100% certain that they also shared this information on their website. They probably also did a couple of those obnoxious robocalls reminding parents to attend. But as we all know, parents are super busy and they don't check websites every day, and they hang up within 15 seconds of those robocalls. It's actually a real statistic. We measure that. Parents hate robocalls. So what Joyner does to make sure that they get high attendance at their event is they post all of their school functions to Facebook, and they encourage their families to share that information. So they don't spend a lot of time getting people to friend their Facebook page. What they do is share party invites, and then by sharing party invites, sharing what's happening in their school out to the world. So what I love about this are three things. One, it costs nothing. Two, for them, it's super effective in getting folks into the building. And then three, it really helps them build their Facebook following so that they can also use it to share other types of information that is probably not as fun as a food truck frenzy. All right. And then number 4, the last thing that we measure is, do our schools maintain clear two-way communication? Remember, when we talked about what are our rules on social media, we only had 3 of them, and the last one was to listen. So for many reasons, our school district decided to delay school for 2 hours on Tuesday. And after after we published our school calendar. So in order for us to avoid confusion and for us to make sure that parents didn't show up to the school super early, we needed to really get the word out. And so we did that. We blasted the message literally everywhere, and pretty instantly we started to get critical feedback. For us, this is normal day-to-day business. We share news, and because we're such a large district, it's really unusual. We get a lot of positive feedback, most of it positive, but it's unusual that we would post something and not get some critical feedback. So in this case, with our 2-hour delay, the questions that we got were pretty consistent. Parents wanted to know primarily, why couldn't we close school instead? Why did we just have to do a 2-hour delay? Were schools going to be safe on Tuesday? Should they send their children? Are we going to have extra security? All legitimate concerns. And so I wanted to show y'all an example of like how we manage this and how we as a district manage our two-way communication. So here's a post reminding parents, again, this is probably the 6th post that we put out, reminding parents that we're opening up on a 2-hour delay on Tuesday. Traditional methods of communication for us and what we would have done in the past, it would dictate that we would blast out our message, that we would pack our bags and go home. And then what would happen is folks would start to talk, and they would talk in the supermarket, and they would talk at soccer practice, and my absolute favorite place from the talk, they would talk in private Facebook groups, and then they would start to make up their own narrative of what they thought was happening. And the narrative in this case is pretty clear. The school system was putting our kids at risk. They don't care. The school system is out of touch. Our school board is out of touch. So this is really where we find the most value in our parent engagement strategy. We probably responded, I put 2 questions in here. The one on the left is our Facebook post. The one on the right is our private Facebook messages. We do heavy traffic on our private Facebook messages and on our private Twitter messages. So we responded to dozens of these, and we respond to them pretty quickly and transparently because for us, trust and transparency are so important, and they're so hard to get. We in the school district, we encourage a culture of transparency, and so What that means for us is that we have to have a culture of listening and responding. If parents think that we are not there for them, then how can they trust us to be there for our students? So I wanted to end on this note because how we as a district respond is also really key to our strategy. We're expecting all of our teachers to do this. We're expecting all of our schools to do this, and we can't allow them to do that, or we can't lead them in doing that unless we're also leading by example. And so we do spend a lot of energy and a lot of effort in making sure that we're doing that so that our teachers have a good example of how they also need to be responding. So I'll end on that note, and then if there's any questions.
Well, hey, Lisa, it's Morgan. Yes, we do have questions. Again, another popular segment here, so let's kind of dive into some of these. So one of the questions we got is from Don Taylor, Worthington City Schools. Asked, and it's actually a good question, too, because I think it gets back into this thing about just one and done where you used to blast it out and leave home, but now it's about, the continuous messaging. Don asked, do you tease your upcoming Facebook live streams on Facebook and or Twitter before you do them, like with a photo and a time? And if so, how long before you do that? So what's kind of been the model you found to get good engagement and get people watching in?
Yeah, so we do, and this is something that we're still experimenting with. If it's a big event, so for example, for our district, our big events are Teacher of the Year events or Principal of the Year events, then we want to start letting people know pretty early on that we're going to Facebook Live it, because we want them to plan on reserving that time so that they can watch it, and we want them to know that. What we found for smaller events is we do blasts not well in advance, but up to a couple of 20 minutes, 10 minutes out before the event starts. And we'll do that for smaller things, and that's really what our teachers have found are good when they're communicating with their parents or they're getting ready to maybe Facebook Live a science experiment.
Great. And that's good stuff, folks. It's a common thread between what everybody has talked about today, but a lot of this really, it's the policy. It's social media is not just a one and done. It's kind of a continuous nurturing of this relationship, which Ray Garza from Oxnard has a question around that too. And it's really about keeping things up to date. So how do you keep your news? You guys are the 16th largest school district. So, Lisa, how do you keep your news and info up to date 24/7 with district and school websites? Who's involved with the strategy? Kind of how do you manage that?
So we are fortunate that we have a really large team. We've got 12 folks here. And so the way we divide up our staff is it's similar to newspapers. Everybody takes a separate beat. And so somebody might have transportation, somebody might have child nutrition, and that person is responsible for all of the communications, soups to nuts, in how we communicate. But that said, our schools do not have large social media teams. In fact, they have teams of 0 or part-time teams of teachers doing it in the bus loop and doing it when they get home or doing it in between breaks in the classroom. And so we encourage them to have a similar strategy, which is have somebody in charge of your transportation communication, have somebody in charge of your child nutrition communication, have somebody in charge, your secretary maybe in charge of the special events. And so somebody's always responsible for making sure that information goes out.
And that actually, and the stuff we're talking about, Abby, I think it's Malone from Garden Grove Unified School District, actually has a question. So as you're developing, you've got a lot of stuff going on, obviously, a lot of tweets, a lot of Facebook posts. This one actually, I think, is a really good question, too. So she asked, do teachers use their own devices when they set up a Twitter account? And if so, what type of professional development, which I would also say what type of policy do you have when you give to ensure that there are appropriate posts that are going out?
So those are good questions. And honestly, it's a question that we've struggled with. So we have a strategy of making sure that we have 1 to 3 devices in our classroom. And we've been working in the past couple of years of funding that so that there's enough technology in the classroom that teachers can use the technology issued by the district to do this. That said, we don't have a policy in place that says that teachers can't use their own phones to do social media, but we try to make sure that teachers shouldn't have to do that. And so we try to make sure that they have the technology in place to do that. What was the second question was what policies in place do we have to ensure that?
Yeah, what kind of professional development, / policies do you have in place to ensure teachers post appropriate content?
Yeah, so most of our we do a lot of professional development in this, and most of our professional development really is in terms of how teachers can use both technology and social media to impact learning, how they can use it in their classroom with their students. We have policies about social media use, and they're probably the same as everyone else's, which means, don't post anything political, don't do things that would be considered inappropriate. But we have a philosophy, which is if we're going to trust our employees, ourselves, to have conversations that we would have in person, right? If I can talk to you about something happening in the school in person, like Common Core or lunch schedules, then I should also, as a professional, also trust you to have those same conversations on social media. So that's really our guidance to our teachers, which is, use common sense and be the professional that we know you. And if there's an issue, then we'll talk about it and use it as a learning opportunity.
You give digital timeouts. No, that's just a joke. No. No more timeouts for folks. We cut you off from your device for 2 hours. Actually, Wade Greenlee gets the honor of having the last question on our webinar today. Wade is from the Carson City School District. So Wade asks, as the technology coordinator and an avid social mediaist, I'm trying to get our district to use social media more for just the reasons you outlined in the webinar. Do you have 3 possible approaches that Wade can use to convince him? So above what you've talked about today, is there anything else you've found successful, Lisa, that works?
So I can tell you, Wade, what we did, which is it's sometimes difficult, especially when we're in education, to shift culture. So what we did was use social media and then walked back into the room and said, let me show you what's happening. And so we didn't really ask permission first. We felt like what we wanted was more examples, and so we would use it, we would experiment, and then we would come back and talk to our leaders about what worked and what didn't work. We have a learning culture in our organization, which is, we're allowed to make mistakes and we're allowed to learn from them, and we really exploit that, especially when we're learning about new things, and social media is new for a lot of folks.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there, and obviously, folks, as you can see from today, first of all, thank you. We're going to wrap here today, folks, but as you can see, there's a lot of things around policy, around training, around socialization of this. There's a lot of good stuff, and so it's very important, folks. Share the message of this, and within 48 hours, you're going to get a link that's going to give you the recording of this live conversation. We encourage you to share it with you. Also, remember, at the end of this today, you're going to get a link that pops up for the survey. Please give us feedback. Let us know what we can do to improve this. And just remember, within 48 hours, we'll get you that link. Make sure you share it with your friends. So first of all, a big thank you to ArchiveSocial, our partner, for helping us put this on. As true to form of the Center for Digital Education, this has been a truly educational session for the last 90 minutes. I hope that you folks have gotten a lot out of it. Make sure that you leave your comments for us. And also a big thank you to the fellow speakers, Angela Dice, Lisa Luten, and Anil Chawla. Folks, well done. It's literally, we have a screen full of comments here and questions we just can't get to today. So it was a very informative topic, a very engaging topic. So folks, stay tuned. We appreciate having you on this webinar today. We appreciate the fact that you spent 90 minutes with us. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you again as soon at another Center for Digital Education event. Everybody stay safe and have fun out there, and we'll see you next time. Have a great afternoon.